Vargadapi Gariyasi. To us, the one who has given birth to us, our mothers, and that land which supports both us and our mothers, which is our motherland, are both important to us. To understand, appreciate, and relish the civilization, we need to understand what kind of a civilization we are born into. And which better subject than history coupled with architecture? So, in this subject of ancient Indian architecture and its appreciation, we are now going to step into the golden age of India. Again, most historians opine that this is the golden age of India that lasted between the 250 and the 550 CE. This is called the Gupta period. So one of the very famous kings in this particular dynasty was Samudragupta. So his reach of victory was so much that from the east, from the north and the northeast part of India, he came further till the south. He defeated Vishnugopa of Kanchipuram in Tamil Nadu in the south of India. And this king is said to have been a Vaishnavite by faith. So he bent towards Vaishnavism. So all this while we have had the opportunity to discuss the kings who were generous and who were patrons of the Buddhists, the Jains, and the Ajivikas. Now we are going to get into the Hindu faiths as well. So Samudragupta was a Vaishnavite by faith and is said to have performed the Ashwamedha Mahayajnam. So Ashwamedha is a sacrifice which we come across in our Ramayana and Mahabharata. I have made various references to it. Dasharatha performed Ashwamedha Mahayajnam. In his predecessors, we have the famous King Sagara who performed Ashwamedha Mahayajnam. So many instances of Ashwamedha. Well, Rama himself performed Ashwamedha Mahayajnam. So if you can see this coin, here is a coin that depicts about his Ashwamedha sacrifice that was performed. So this is a Samudragupta age coin. If you remember the introductory part of this course, I did say that numismatics matter a lot. The coins matter a lot. Here we have a depiction of a horse. And that's a Yupastambha. So besides the horse, so which depicts that it could have been Ashwamedha Mahayajnam, which he had performed. He was a Vainika too, so he used to play the veena. So on one side was archery and his ability in the warfare, he used to play the veena. He agreed with the Sinhala king called as Meghavarna. So the Sinhala king of Sri Lanka was Meghavarna, with whom Samudragupta signed a pact that both of them together wanted to renovate the Bodh Gaya monastery. So two countries coming together, or one country seeking permission from the other to do business or some kind of renovation is not new. We had a king of Sri Lanka who was ready to renovate the Bodh Gaya monastery because the Sinhala king was a Buddhist. In his lineage, in the lineage of Samudragupta, came the very famous king, Chandragupta II, who is often referred to as Vikramaditya. Now, in Vikramaditya's court flourished the Navaratnas, the 9 gems, of which we have Kalidasa. So, how do we know that Kalidasa belonged to his court? Because generally, most evidences of the past will record the events of a king, not of the commoners. Kalidasa was a commoner. Yes, he was a great poet. He is a celebrated poet. We all relish him. We adore him. But beyond that, how do we understand? So this is where there are a few cross references. Now, Kalidasa wrote a work called as Malavikagnimitram. So he wrote 3 plays: Abhignana Shakuntalam, Vikramurvashiyam, Malavikagnimitram. So Abhignana Shakuntalam is completely based on Mahabharata as the theme. So which has Dushyanta, Durvasa, Shakuntala, Kanva, and so on. He wrote Vikramurvashiyam, which also has Mahabharatam and Bhagavatam as the theme, because we have Pururavas, we have Uruvashi. So they're all there. Whereas one play has caught the attention of most research scholars, which is Malavikagnimitram, because the others were poems. So there is an imaginary poem called as Meghadutam. There is a poem that talks about Rama's predecessors, successors, and Rama himself, which is Raghuvamsham. There is an incident from the Puranas where the Devas reach Shiva for the birth of Kumara, who is Kartikeya in the north, Sharavana Bhava, as well as Muruga in the south. So that is Kumara Sambhavam. They are the three poems, Padyams. Now we are dealing with this work called Malavika Agnimitram. This Agnimitra, Malavika and Agnimitra, this Agnimitra is a person who belongs to the Shunga dynasty. So Shungas lasted between the 140 and the 150 CE. When I say this Agnimitra, especially of the Shunga dynasty. So when I talk about 140 and 150 BCE, surely Kalidasa should have lived either alongside him or after him. So not before that. So if you start tracing from 150 BCE till Chandragupta II's time, which roughly comes before the 500 and the 400 CE. Now, he could have lived there. Kalidasa could have lived there. Now, what is the other counter reference? Now, there is a place in Madhya Pradesh called Mandsaur. So, there is an inscription of 473 CE, dating to 473 CE, with verses which resemble Kalidasa's works. So, a person, a local poet who was acquainted with Kalidasa's works could have only mimicked that. You cannot call it plagiarism, somebody who mimicked. So if Kalidasa's works have been mimicked by 473, he must have lived before that. The counter references in Aihole inscription in Karnataka dating to 634 CE, we have Kalidasa and Bharavi's names mentioned. So Kalidasa's name was clearly mentioned in 634 CE. Kalidasa's poems were mimicked in 473 CE. Agnimitra in Malavika Agnimitram belonged to 140 to 150 BCE. So Kalidasa must have ideally lived during Chandragupta II's time. Now we have in brief spoken about the Guptas. Now I'm going to take you to the architecture. This is a beautiful place called Devgad, Devonka Sthan, place where the celestials live. But then over usage, it has become Diogad. It is in a village. It's a village in a Lalitpur district of Uttar Pradesh. So here is a Dashavatara temple. So I'm showing you the backside of the temple. Can you see the picture? So to the blue skies is this beautiful temple. So when I say beautiful temple, you will know the beauty when I show you the stone panels. So now, if you look at this picture, there are two people seated. One with two hands, the other with four. Both of them are in similar postures. Of course, this man's left foot is down, the other's right foot is down. Both of them are holding rosary beads. They are holding some japamala in their hands. And you must find Brahma at the top. If you look at the top, you find Brahma with many heads seated in the lotus. It's a beautiful lotus. And there are celestials who are attending to Brahma and are looking down as to what Brahma is looking at. So who could this be? So these two are Narayana and Nara. So in Bhagavatam, we come across this Naranarayana who were there to perform penance in the Naranarayana Parvat in Badrika Ashramam, which is Badrinath in Uttarakhand. They were also there to annihilate the demons of the Kavachas. Now, so you're looking at Narayana. So you find the lion and the deer seated at peace. So below Narayana, you find the deer and the fawn. So they are at peace. And below Nara is the lion. So now when the lion and the deer are seated at peace, it was a beautiful depiction to say that there is only Sattva Gunam. So now that I've discussed Kalidasa, I feel so tempted to quote Kalidasa here. So Kalidasa says in Vikram Urvashiyam how Urvashi was born. It seems Indra wanted to test the perseverance and the chastity of Nara and Narayana's penance. So he sent the damsels. To show that he could create somebody more beautiful, Narayana tapped on his thigh. The thigh is called Uru in Sanskritam. Since the Lord tapped on his thigh, from the thigh it is said emerged a damsel who was very, very pretty. She was called Urvashi. So this verse goes like this. ऊरुद्भव नरसखस्य मुने सुरस्त्री कैलासनाथमुपसृत्य निवर्तमान बन्दीकृता विबुध शत्रुभिरर्धमार्गे क्रन्दन्त्यतः शरणमप्सरणां गणोऽयम्. So this is a beautiful depiction of Nara and Narayana. Now, I'll take you to the next panel. Can you see the panel? So this panel has celestials who are looking at from the top. It could be Brahma in the center. It's slightly damaged. And you find Garuda who's flying. Look at his wings. And on Garuda is seated the Lord, who is Vishnu. And his mace is slightly broken. He is casually resting his one hand on his thigh. And Garuda is depicted partially. It's not completely a bird. It has been depicted partially as a bird. And you will find the elephant reaching out with its trunk. We don't see the pain in the elephant. Probably its pain was alleviated. On the other side, you find a person with many hoods. It could be a snake, need not be Adisesha. But what we find very unique is, this is a panel of Gajendra Moksha, very famous in Srimad Bhagavatam, where there is an elephant which goes to pluck the lotus flower from the lake, whose one leg is caught by the crocodile. And to get relieved of the crocodile, it cries in pain. And then the Lord comes on mounted on Garuda. In fact, a Carnatic music composer in Sanskrit of the 18th and the 19th century sings, Kalidosha Haratitha Prabhava Guru Guhadinato Kapila Shukadi Sanuda Garuda Vaharudam Varadaraja. So he says, Garuda Vahanadi Rudam. So there's a Vahanam of Garuda. He sits on Garuda. Now, generally the depiction should have a crocodile. But here we have a depiction of a Naga. Could have been that the Naga, we believe that it was a celestial who was cursed to be the crocodile. So this, when we don't see the pain in the elephant, and we say that the pain has come down, it means it is relieved of the crocodile, which means the crocodile is relieved of its material body, and from the material body comes this original form of the Gandharva. So it could be that. So this is a Gajendra Moksha stone panel. Now I'll take you to the other stone panel. If you can see this. So here this is an Ananta Shayana Vishnu. Generally you find Vishnu in the mirror image form, wherein the head is on the left hand side. But here it's on the right side. That's okay, because you do have a temple of the Chera and the Chola times in the south of India, in Tamil Nadu, which is called Thiruvattaru, where the Lord is referred to as Adi Keshava Perumal. So there also he is very similar. So you find the multi-hooded Adisesha, who's in whose couch, who's a serpent couch, and on him is resting the Lord. Now there is a sacred thread to the Lord. He rests very casually. There are Devis who are attending to him. There is Brahma at the top. Now if you go further deep, you find on the elephant is Indra. Next to Indra is a peacock, and on him should be Kartikeya, who's Muruga. On the other side is Rishabham, which is Nandikeshwara, on which is seated Lord Shiva with Parvati. So all of them are looking at Ananta Shayana Vishnu. Now, what is very interesting is something that we are going to see below Ananta Shayana Vishnu. What are they? There are about 6 people. So let's go from the right. It could be, it's a woman. Then there are 5 men. So there are 2 interpretations given to this. The interpretation is, from the left if I go, there is one person who's standing very casually and overlooking at the others. Very casually, very calm and serene. This supervising person could be Yudhishthira. Next, there is a person who's holding something in his hand. Could be a mace of a different shape or a size. Could be Bhima. Next is a person whose hands-on approach. with a sword. Of course, it should have been with an arrow, right? But the interpretation is during the battle of the Pandavas as Guru Dakshina with Drupada, the king of Kampilya, Arjuna jumped into Drupada's chariot and took the sword out of the scabbard. Next is there are two men, and the last of the men is very subservient, who's ready to execute. He must be the youngest, so he must be Sahadeva. The other person must have been very conscious of his health and gym body, so he shows his shoulder. It could be Nakula. The lady who is very casual about these 5 men and who stands in a very serene pose could be Draupadi. This is the first interpretation. The second is a very, very interesting one. These are the Ayudha Purushas. So the Lord, if you see at the top, is not holding any Ayudham. Can you see any Ayudham? No. So all these Panchayudhams are depicted this way. Now let's go one by one. Now, if the lady whom we are seeing should be an Ayudham, who could she be? So the interpretation is of the Lord's weapons, Gada means the mace. Gada is a akara antavachaka shabdam. So since it ends with the sound a, it must be Gada. The woman is a representative of Gada because Gada is feminine in nature. Now, next is Chakra. So then is Sharanga. Then there is a sword. So the sword is very easy to depict. There is one person who's holding a shoulder, could be Sharanga, the bow. And there is one person who's very ready to execute whatever is said. That could be Chakra. So there is Chakra, there is Sharanga, there is sword, which is Nandakam. Then there is a conch, who is the supervisor. And now I have a feeling that this could be a scabbard who is holding the sword. There are two people who are holding the sword. One is holding it, the other one is holding it this way. Could be the scabbard. Now, we have discussed these images, right? So when I'm discussing these images, you must have noticed that this temple also depicts the states of the Lord. So there is, we must have heard of the Agama Shastras, especially the Pancharatra Agama, that talks about the Lord as the creator, protector, sustainer, and so on. So we have the 4 states. Paravasudeva, who gives rise to Vasudeva, Aniruddha, Sankarshana, Aniruddha, Pradyumna. So here we have Anantashayi. So who's representative of Aniruddha, who's the creator. So Bahusyam Prajayeti, let there be many creations, let there be this world. So if this is his thought, that is creation, which is depictive of Aniruddha in the Vyuha state. So Anantashayi is depictive of that. Next we have Nara Narayana, who's Pradyumna. So Nara Narayana's Pradyumna, because with their meditation, with their yogic posture, they're able to sustain the created world. Then is Sankarshana, who's Gajendra Varada, who's here to destroy the demoniac forces or brings about annihilation. So that's Sankarshana. And then there is Vasudeva at the entrance of the temple in Diogad. So that is depictive of Vasudeva. So Vasudeva, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Sankarshana. So they are the Chatur Vyuhas. So Chatur Vyuha is incidentally the name of the Lord that comes in Vishnu Sahasranama. So Vishnu Sahasranama must have been popular. Ramayanam, Bhagavatam and Mahabharatam must have been popular. Pancharatra Agamam must have been popular to create this particular temple, and this was created during the times of Chandragupta II. So we can talk about the 3rd and the 4th century CE. Now, this is on one side. We are still continuing with the Gupta dynasty. I'm going to continue with Chandragupta II, who lived between 380 and 414 CE. Another beautiful depiction under the Vaishnavite theme in the central part of India. So they are again Udayagiri case. If you remember, we discussed about Udayagiri and Khandagiri in Bhubaneswar under the rocket architecture. That's a different Udayagiri. This is a different Udayagiri. Now in this Udayagiri, there are many caves. There are Jain caves as well. But this is the zenith or the pinnacle. Can I show you this? Yeah. Now we are going to see a beautiful depiction in the cave of Varaha Avataram. Can you see it? So, Udhritasi Varahena Krishnena Shatabahuna Ichamina Viharakachapa Mahapotrin Yadrichaharehe Rakshavaamana Rosharama Karunaka Kutstha Hela Halin Krida Vallabha Kalkavahanadasha Kalkinnitif Pratyaham is a verse that came in the 13th century by Vedanta Deshika. Now, look at this beautiful depiction of Varaha. Probably, if you have to count the number of times I'm telling you beautiful, that will be innumerable. But trust me, this architecture is doing something to me. As I'm explaining, I'm getting those goosebumps. I don't know whether I'm talented enough to give you the same feeling, but I feel very, very proud of my civilization. Just look at this. So you have a Varaha. Remember, Varaha Avataram of the Lord could be depicted in this form, where it's human with the wild boar's face, or it could be completely wild boar. We'll see that later. When we come to the Chandela dynasty, I'll show you that. Now, the you can call it the Samprokshanam or the consecration. It happened in 401 CE. That's what the inscription states. So 401 CE corresponds very much to the time of Chandragupta II. But it could have been constructed by one of the feudatory chiefs or by one of his ministers. So this is a Varaha panel. Now I'm going to show you the same panel with numbers. Can you see them? Yeah. Now when I'm going to show you this panel, look at it. So there is Vishnu. Now one is Vishnu. So Vishnu comes as Varaha Avataram. It is said that there were two brothers, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu were the sons of Diti Devi, born of Kashyapa. So Kashyapa lived in Kashmirapura, because Kashyapapura is Kashmira Vihara, which is Kashmir today. And it is largely believed that his sons, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, built their capital in the current city called Multan in Pakistan. It's called Mulasthanam. And so that's about Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Now, Hiranyaksha is said to have troubled Mother Earth. I've answered this in the Purana section. He could have not directly tormented Earth, the entire Earth. He could have troubled people in a certain portion in his territory and would have caused a lot of pollution then. In those days also pollution could have existed. Without plastic, still pollution is possible. So that could have given rise to a lot of glaciers melting from the Himalayas and a lot of villages getting submerged. Even if the normal land, the bhumi that gets submerged in front of our eyes, a certain village, we say bhumi is getting submerged. So bhumi for us in Hindu parlance is Bhumi Devi, Mother Earth. So to any onlooker, he'll say Bhumi Devi is getting submerged. So to a person, it's like a Chinese whisper. The poet who records it will say the entire earth got submerged. What could have happened is a certain portion of the land could have got submerged. To release that portion, somebody has to lift it from the top or pour or ensure that the water has a place to get out. So Varaha must have done that because he had tusks. It's a wild boar. So one is Vishnu as Varaha Murti. Now you see the depiction of Bhumi Devi as a lady. She's so beautiful. Of course, when I'm just looking at her torso. I'm not able to see her head because that's all damaged during invasions. And that's goddess Earth, Bhumi Devi as Earth. Now let's look at tree. Can you see tree? That tree is very small compared to the mammoth size of Varaha, because Vishnu Puranam tells Mahavaraha Sputapadma Lochanaha. It's a huge Varaha. So Brahma must have been very small. Look at Brahma there. So it's a small lotus upon which is seated Chaturmukha Brahma. We don't know if the fourth face is visible, or it could be visible. We don't know. It's very tall or high for us to reach. Next, 4. Now you can see Lord Shiva there coming on a Nandi. Next, 5. If you look at 5, they all have halos around their head. So there are 12. If you can count them, there are 12. So they are Dwadasha Adityas. Dwadasha. Dasha in Sanskrit is 10. Dwa is 2. Dwadasha is 12. 12 Adityas. Next, 6 and 7. The 6th one, 6 which I'm showing, could be Agni, because his hair is in the form of flames. So it could be Agni. 7 could be Vayu because his hair looks all puffy. So there must be air. That must be Vayu Bhagavan, air. 8 must be Ashtavasus. So the Ashtavasus, so there are Vasus. So the Vasus come very importantly in the Upodghatam, the commencement of Mahabharatam, because the Ashtavasus were born as sons of Ganga. 7 of them returned. The 8th one was Bhishma. So Ashtavasus. So this Ashtavasu, if you find, you can find only 6 of them. Why? Because Agni and Vayu together make up the Ashtavasus. So 6, 7 and 8 put together are Ashtavasus. Now let's look at 9. You will find 6, 9, 10, 11. So you've got 11 depictions. They are the Ekadasha Rudras. So there are 11 Rudra Murtis. So you've got Ekadasha Rudras. And you find 10. There are the extra Ganas along with the Rudras. So this is depictive of our celestial world. And now let's look at 11. That entire set in 2 rows are the rishis who are looking amazed, awestruck at Varahavataram, giving uplifting Mother Earth. Now look at 12. Who is 12? Because he has been taking Mother Earth out of the waters, that particular land out of the waters, oceanic waters. That must be Samudra Raja, Ocean King, 12. Let's look at 14 and 13. So 13 looks small, 14 looks large compared to 13. So 14 could be Chandragupta the 2, the king himself. And the minister who would have got the patronizing king to help in this sculpture could have been the minister, Veerasena. That's 13. 14 is the king. Who is 15? That's Nagadeva or Adisesha. Remember, within earth, we believe that Vishnu carries Mother Earth, his wife, as Adisesha. So as he lifts Mother Earth, Adisesha is very thankful. So Adisesha is expressing his gratitude. Look at 16. 16 is a Sri Mahalakshmi herself. So she's looking at the scene where her co-wife is being protected. 17 is an entire depiction of another set of rishis looking from the other side. So there is 18 and 19, they're holding instruments. So that must be Narada playing tambura, and 19 could be Tumburu who's playing the veena. So this is an entire panel. Look at the panel. So why will someone not call it beautiful? So this was done in the 380 and 414 CE. So this is one of the best depictions of Varaha Bhagavan. You can see his sacred thread as well. It doesn't look like a thread. It looks like a beautiful, very well ornated garland. So that's what it looks like. So this belongs to Chandragupta the 2 time. Now I'm going to take you across Chandragupta the 2, who drove away the foreign tribes, and his reign was very well celebrated. Fahian, who was a Chinese Buddhist monk. So he refers to his regime. So I have picked up the translation. Of course, I don't, sorry that I don't know to read Chinese. So I've just picked up a book, a very, very renowned book with that gives the translation of what he had written, Fahian. So the book I've placed in a record for you, a record of the Buddhist kingdoms. It's an account by the Chinese monk Fahian, his travels in India and Ceylon. So I've mentioned who is translated and who's a publisher. It was published in 1886. Now, this is one interesting note that he has to write about Chandragupta the 2. I'll just read it verbatim. It's there for you on the screen as well. The snow and heat are finely tempered, and there is neither hoarfrost nor snow. The people are numerous and happy. This is about the people during the king's regime. They have not to register their households. Only those who cultivate the royal land have to pay a portion of the gain from it. If they want to go, they go. So look at the freedom, because see, if a Chinese person is talking about the freedom given in Chandragupta II's time, either Chandragupta must have been very magnanimous, or Fahian could have come from China, which was a country even then which had a lot of rules and restrictions. So if they want to stay on, they stay on. He says, the king governs without decapitation or other corporal punishments. Criminals are simply fined according to circumstances. So it's not a death row for everyone. Even in cases of repeated attempts at wicked rebellion, they only have their right hand cut off. It may seem barbarous to us, but probably that was a punishment meted out then. The king's bodyguards and attendants all have salaries. Throughout the whole country, the people do not kill any living creature. Interesting. See this line very carefully. Not drink any intoxicating liquor. This is not supporting the fact, because of course in Ramayana and Mahabharata times we had Varuni, people used to drink. So not that it was a liquor free country, but he does mention, it was very new to him, I suppose, Fahian. He says not drink any intoxicating liquor. Look at that last word. Nor eat onions or garlic. So it was very new for Fahian to see such people who don't eat onions and garlic. Now, in this Gupta dynasty came Kumaragupta the One, who was the founder of the Nalanda University. It was an ancient Mahavihara, a monastery for Buddhists where courses were taught. It was one of the earliest universities, very well established universities that we have ever known, and it was a residential university. So records of students from China. So we have found inscriptions and manuscripts dating, and we have found evidences that were students from China, Korea, Vietnam, Tibet, Central Asia traveling to learn Buddhism in Nalanda. Later, there were Hindu studies also included as a part of syllabus. Hyunzang of the 6th and the 7th century studied under Shilabhadra, who and was called Mokshadeva. So Hyunzang got a new name under this guru. He was called Mokshadeva after Fahian and Hyunzang. So Fahian came much before Hyunzang. So after Fahian and Hyunzang, because Hyunzang mentions of Harsha. So after Fahian and Hyunzang, Yijing visited this place. He's another person from China who was not given permission to visit India. So he took a detour. He went across Central Asia, then stepped into Afghanistan and came through that border and reached Nalanda. Later in 1200 AD, so still I'm in the Gupta dynasty, but this particular line I wanted to tell of Nalanda University. I'll just show you the Nalanda University before. So this black and white picture shows you the ruins of Nalanda University then. Now there's another depiction of Nalanda University that you can see in front of you. You can see it, right? It's all brickly done. There are some mortars used here and there. Now there is an overview, a top view, a bird's eye view of how Nalanda looks. I hope you can see it. Now, this Nalanda, which was used and described by Fahian, Hyunzang, Yijing, in 1200 AD, an invader called Ikhtiyar al-Din Muhammad Bakhtiyar Khalji. So he came to Bihar and he devastated the entire place and library and burnt the manuscripts. It is said, it could be folklore, it is said that the amount of manuscripts which were burnt, there were heaps of smoke coming from this burning university for months together. And incidentally, we have the railway station and the town named after this Bakhtiyar Khalji who burnt this place. Well, I'm going to take you to another. Now, we have kind of crossed the Gupta period. I'm going to take you to very, very interesting place. It is believed that there was a volcano which erupted thousands of years ago, but now it's a crater. This is what the belief is. It's a very strong, hard mountain. You can find greenery. The picture must have been taken after the monsoons. This is in Maharashtra. It's called the Ajanta Caves. It must, if you look, if I can zoom the picture for you, you can find small holes in this picture. So below the greenery section, you can find small holes, right? Those are the caves. So it's a very, this picture is taken from a very far off distance. Now, if I go into the Chaitya hall of Ajanta, this is how it looks. Look at the grandeur of this Chaitya. Look at the pose in which the Dwarapalakas are standing outside below the level 1 and level 2. And the amount of detailing which has gone into the rock, it looks like red granite, or probably the color is depictive of the sun's rays falling on it. How it looks from the inside. Here, you're coming across for the first time an exquisitely carved pillar The pillar is so minutely carved. You can see various levels of the pillar. And if you look at the thickest layer, there is a circle and there is a small 3D projection there as well. So this is where that projection begins. Now we are going to go to a very, very interesting and a very celebrated dynasty of the south, the Pallavas. So they were regarded as the feudatories of the Satavahanas of the south. So we have discussed Satavahanas who covered largely the Deccan, Maharashtra, some parts of Odisha, largely Karnataka and the Andhra country. So they were called the Andhras too. So the Pallavas ruled from the Kanchi. They were the feudatories of Satavahanas. Then they later declared independence. Now, where do the Pallavas trace their ancestry from? So Pallavas have said from Bharadwaja Maharshi came Drona, and from Drona came Ashwathama. From Ashwathama came the first Pallava king. That's their belief. And this is depicted in a temple. So we'll be discussing this temple later. It's the Vaikuntha Perumal temple in Kanchipuram. One of the panel shows a person in penance, and then there is a jar which depicts Dronam. From Dronam is a jar, is a test tube baby, comes, not exactly test tube, so don't mind if I'm using the modern term. It means that he was born of a jar, so he was called Drona. Drona itself means jar. So Dronacharya's son was Ashwathama. From Ashwathama, so Ashwathama is depicted as a little child, if you can see. It's a cradle, and then you've got the Pallava. Some say it is the Pallava king who's depicted in the cradle. Nevertheless, they trace their descent to Drona and Ashwathama. Now, Mahendra Varman is a king that whom we are going to discuss. So Mahendra Varman, who lived between 600, who ruled between 600 and 630 AD or CE in our parlance, he constructed the Pancha Rathas. So they were called as Pancha Pandava Rathas. Pandavas have nothing to do with these 5 chariots. Of course, the archaeologists, the historians sat together and they wanted to coin a name. They went by certain methods or some clues that this gave. So from rock cut architecture, we are seeing monoliths which were used. So there is still no joining. A single piece of rock was all done. So I'm going to show you the first Ratha. So this is a beautiful Ratha. If you can see the Ratha, it's not complete. If you can see from the top, there's a Shikhara, there are 3 levels, and then you find the pillars down in the ground level, and it's still incomplete. So probably there's a theory that the king wanted the Ratha to be completed and a pathway, set of stairs given within the Ratha to reach to the Shikhara. So it's like an Ashtanga Vimana of Vaikuntha Perumal temple in Kanchipuram. So this was his idea. Now, this is the largest of all the Rathas. So since this is the largest, it could be depictive of Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas. The next one that you see is like a cuboid. So it's rectangle on both sides and square on the other sides. So it's elongated, something different from others. So Bhima used to be given 50% of any food, and the remaining 50% is what the brothers and mother Kunti used to have. So it was very different from others. This again looks beautiful. This is a Bhima Ratha. The next one is very, very similar to Yudhishthira's Ratha, but smaller in nature. It doesn't have so many pillars and doesn't have the grandeur. That must be Arjuna's. Now, Nakula and Sahadeva's Ratha are just like this. The one that you see on your screen, it's very simple, very, very simple. There are not too many levels, very simple, very, very elegant, very simple. Nakula, Sahadeva Ratha. Now, where is Draupadi? So here is Draupadi's Ratha. How do we call it Draupadi? Because we have Mahishasura Mardini or Durga's image within the temple. So it's like a temple. So it houses a Devi. So it must be depictive of a woman. So this is how the Pancha Pandava Rathas in Mahabalipuram has come into existence. Now, Narasimha Varman, the first, between 630 and 668 AD, he ruled. He defeated the Chalukyan king called Pulikeshin II in 642 AD. To commemorate this event of defeating the Chalukyan king, he came back to this port city along the Bay of Bengal in the state of Tamil Nadu, and he wanted to construct something. What did he construct to commemorate his victory over Pulication? He constructed, or he asked this work be commissioned of this particular stone panel. Can you see the stone panel? Since he defeated the Chalukyan king, he was called Ma Mallan. Ma in Tamil, in Sanskrit, Ma means Mahalakshmi, Ma means no. There are various meanings to Ma. In Tamil, Ma means great. Ma Malla. Malla means one who practices the Malyuddham, who does a duel like Kushti. So, Ma Mallan. This king, Narasimhavarman, was called Ma Mallan, and that is how the sport city got its name, Mamallapuram. And the panel that you see is a depiction of it. Can you see the panel? So there are two interpretations to it. The first interpretation is, it could be the descent of Ganga, how Bhagiratha wanted to get his ancestors, because his ancestors, Sagaraputras, they were all burnt to ashes, turned into ashes by Kapila Muni's Shapam. To get them annihilated, they were annihilated. To get them emancipated, the waters of Ganga were required, and for that Bhagiratha had to do prayatnam. He had to take a lot of efforts. So the descent of Ganga is what is shown here. It's a Bhagiratha prayatnam. And on occasions, a water tank was placed at the top to give a cascading effect. So if you can see the two monoliths, and you see an aperture, a gap between the two. So water used to be poured from a water tank. I'm talking about something like 1500 years back. So to give you that effect, so water used to be poured between those two monoliths, and then it used to give a cascading effect. Look at the aesthetics of the Pallava kings. I just can't stop appreciating them. The other interpretation to this panel is that it is Arjuna's tapas. Because in Vanaparva of Mahabharata, Arjuna, in order to keep himself equipped, he seeks Krishna's guidance and goes to the forest and prays to Indra. And Indra says, you will have to first impress upon Pashupati, who's Lord Shiva, who will give you Pashupatashtram. And obtaining that astram, you come to me, I will give you every missile that's with me. So he does penance, and this penance of Arjuna was so great that Lord Shiva along with Parvati come in the disguise of a hunter and the hunter's wife and bless him. So this has been depicted by Bharavi in Kirata Arjuniyam. We have discussed that in Sanskrit literature course. So Bharavi is said to have lived around Kanchi. So probably to commemorate Bharavi, this could be penance of Arjuna. Or to say that Ganga is very far for us, at least let's see descent of Ganga this way. So this could be descent of Ganga. So it's either Ganga Avataranam or Arjuna Tapas, which is from Kirata Arjuniyam. So this is the panel. I'm not getting into the details of the panel. It will take a very long time to explain the details of the panel. It's very beautiful. You should see the pose in which most of them are standing. It's beyond amazement. Now, while I spoke of the Rathas, we also know that Pallavas, they had the concept of rock cut. When I say rock cut, of scooping into the cave. So this is found in Pallavaram. So Pallavaram is a locality in the metro of Chennai, and that's now the Pallava cave temple of the Pallava times is now a mosque. So you can see the mosque there. Now, I'm going to take you to Mamallapuram, which is the port city, erstwhile capital of the Pallavas. So can you see Varaha? Now, this Varaha, all this we are seeing was built by Narasimhavarman II between 695 and 722 AD. So he was called Rajasimha. So now I'm going to show you Varaha. Can you see Varaha? Varaha Avatar, we've already seen him in Udayagiri caves. Now he has a crown. He's made more deified. There are 4 hands. There is a Shankham which you can see on one. The other hand has Chakram. With one hand he holds his wife Bhumi with such love. With the other hand he caresses her feet. He speaks, maybe this was depictive of Varaha Puranam, where it is a dialogue between Varaha and Bhumi Devi. There are deities who are worshipping. There is a Naga Devata at the bottom. which is again to say that Adisesha is emerging from the bottom. So this is a depiction of Varaha lifting Mother Earth. Now I'm going to show you this panel of Trivikrama, who's measuring the worlds. Can you see Trivikrama measuring the worlds? Look at the number of hands. So you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. And on the other side, you've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's again 8. So this Ashtabhuja, 8-handed Lord, is very important because this is Mamallapuram. Pallavas had another capital called Kanchipuram, which has an Ashtabhuja Perumal temple. There is a temple. And probably when we do the course of influence of Hinduism on Southeast Asia, we'll be discussing Angkor Wat in Cambodia, where this Ashtabhuja will play an important role. I will not forget to make a mention there. So look at this Trivikrama. So he comes as Vamana and grows up as Trivikrama. So when you look at Trivikrama, see, somebody is holding on to his one foot because the other foot is there in the upper worlds. So the other person who's holding the foot is not very clearly holding. As much as I will be showcasing that to you in Badami Chalukya architecture, there he holds it very tightly. So my understanding from the Purana states that it could be Bali's son Namuchi, who's preventing the Lord from growing any further. That was a futile attempt. Nevertheless, now we have Bali. It could be from the right hand side corner, it could be Bali, who's looking with amazement. And some of the demons are fleeing on all directions, looking at the ayudhams, the weapons that the Lord is carrying. And on that lifted foot of the Lord, you can see the lifted foot, there is Brahma who's offering Ganga waters to do Abhishekam to the Lord's foot. This is all on hard granite. Imagine. It's a 3D projection. Now look at the Lord's sword. The Lord's sword is crisscrossing his hands. And it is so naturally done that you can see the sword much before the hands. So, and there you have got the chakram too. So this is a very, very exquisite depiction of Trivikrama Avatara. Now I'm going to show you another depiction. This is a Gajalakshmi panel. Look at the Gajalakshmi panel. How have we seen Lakshmi seated with folded legs on a kamalam? She's seated. And you have elephants on both sides pouring at the same posture. But look at this. You have two women female attendants on one side, two female attendants on the other side. And Gajalakshmi is not on folded legs. She's seated very comfortably, like how we sit on a chair, on a Padmasana. Now she's holding two lotuses in her hand. So it's not four-handed Lakshmi, it's simple two-handed Lakshmi. Now the elephants are performing Abhishekam to Lakshmi. Pushkala Vartakadyehi Kliptaramba Kanaka Kalashaihi Abhyashinchan Gajendraha. So look at the Kanaka Kalasham. They could be golden pots. They all seem stone to us. That's okay. Now, one elephant is holding the Kalasham in its trunk in a posture that it's trying to do Abhishekam to giving bath to Gajalakshmi. The other elephant is accepting the Kalasham from the lady who's holding. So you can see the other elephant's trunk downwards. It is waiting for this lady to give the Kalasham. Whereas this elephant which is pouring is going to be done now. So this lady who's standing below, she is keeping the Kalasham ready for that elephant to accept. So it's a poetry which is depicted like a tableau in granite, in stone. So this is one of the best depictions of Gajalakshmi that I have ever seen. Now I'm going to take you to another panel. So this is a Mahishasura Mardhini panel. Look at the panel. So there is a lion. Seated on that is the very, very heroic, strong Durga. And she's holding a sword. She's got many hands with many weapons. She's there in a position to release the arrow from her bow. Now that she is released, she's going to take the other arrow from her quiver and going to release it. Looking at her heroism, her valor, the buffalo-headed Mahishasura with a mace in his hand is trying to run away. Looking at that Mahishasura run, look at the other people surrounding Mahishasura, the demons. They're also fleeing. There are female attendants to Durga. So look below the lion. So there is a female attendant. So she's trying to fight a demon onto the other side. There are Ganas. And there are Apsarastris who are serving Durga. And look at her slender waist. Look at the confidence with which she raises her head. This is marvelous. So this is stone of Pallavas for us. Now that we have spoken about what is there in the caves, I'm going to take you to a temple built by Narasimhavarman II. It's called the Kailashanatha temple in Kanchipuram. So this king was called Rajasimha. So this was the first structural temple built in the south of India. The temple has a granite base and the above structures are in sandstone. So it was a combination. So it was granite and sandstone because sandstone is easier for sculptures and sculpting. So here I'm going to show you a Durga panel. So here I have a feeling that she must have been exhausted after the war and she's in a cool posture resting on the lion. Look at how she keeps her foot, one foot on the lion and the other foot straight. She's holding her hand on her hip to give that poise. And look at her Trishulam at the top. It looks very different. And there is a parashu on the other side, the axe, there is an arrow, there is a shield. Some of the weapons that I could recognize immediately. And the lion is also very, very happy to find her, it could be a female lion, her master, Durga Devi, victorious in the battle. So it raises one of its front limbs. So this is a Durga panel from the temple. Something very interesting about the Durga panel on one side is Jeshtha, the elder sister to Mahalakshmi, who is regarded as a sign of inauspiciousness. So this is a beautiful Kailashanatha temple. And Kailashanatha temple has many, many mini shrines in its Pradakshina path. You must have a look at it. Out of the paucity of time, I'm not doing that. Now, I'm going to take you to another iconic structure of the Pallavas called the Shore Temple in Mahabalipuram. So Mahabalipuram is the name that we know. It's Mamallapuram. It is a set of 3 temples. So there is one Vishnu temple which is sandwiched between 2 Shiva temples. So the Vishnu, I'll just show you this picture. Can you see a reclining posture? It is that of Sthalashayana or Vishnu. There is a Sthalashayana Perumal temple very close by, and this is Vishnu who reclines on the ground. It's very different. Or people say there could have been Adisesha but could have been lost during the invasions. Nevertheless, now this was built by Rajasimha. An inscription states and calls him Narapati Simha Pallava Vishnu Graha. So this particular temple, the Vishnu temple which is sandwiched between 2 Shiva temples, has a name. It's Narapati Simha. Narapati Simha is Rajasimha built. Pallava, he's a Pallava. Vishnu Graha. So this Vishnu temple built by him. So in the recent years, in the excavation, we have found a miniature temple within this shore temple. So when the sands were excavated, we had this temple. Can you see the tank? It has got about 4 or 5 steps. It's filled with water. It gets filled with water, heavily with water during high tides in the Bay of Bengal. And you can see it's a central piece. It's a small miniature shrine, and behind that is a Varaha that is completely in a boar form. Now, there is an interesting probably piece of art that you have to see from this shore temple. Can you see this? It's a lion. There is a small opening in its chest, and it opens to something within. You know what is it? It is a Mahishasura Mardini. So it's a mini shrine within a lion. So she comes on a lion. So the lion outside is depictive of a Vahanam. So it is expected that Hanumanta Vahanam is the Vahana of Rama. So he says, in my chest I carry Rama. So here the lion carries Durga Devi in his heart, right? So this is like a warrior who's going before the war, wants victory. So he seeks Durga Devi's intervention. So to impress upon her, he sacrifices a deer. So can you see right below the lion, you can find the body of a deer with its head fallen on the ground. So that is depictive of the sacrifice which have been performed. So it's again poetry in motion. Now, of course, there could be some other questions, humane questions, and how could you sacrifice animals? That is part for ethics course. But now we're relishing architecture. Now, what is special about the Shore Temple is it's just on the banks of Bay of Bengal, shores of Bay of Bengal, and in many records, it's referred to as the 7 pagodas. So, for the people who travel from other countries, for them it looked like a pagoda. So 7 pagodas has remained a myth for a very long time until, because we could just find one temple complex, right, of Shore Temple. But when tsunami struck Chennai in the 2004 or 5, I don't remember, as the waters receded, they could see a lot of remains of the other temples in the oceanic floor. So there were 7 pagodas rightly reported by the foreign accounts, but because of the incoming sea waters, they have all been submerged. Now finally, I'm going to take you to the Tiger Caves. The Tiger Caves, what you see is, to my knowledge, the world's first ever stage built for plays, dramas to be depicted to the public. So do you find this cave? You find a dais, a stage, right? So this was constructed. People say it could have been constructed during the time of Narasimhavarman the first or the second, whichever it is. It was constructed in the 5th, 6th and the 7th century. So you find a stage, a dais, steps leading to it. On either side, you've got animals welcoming, and you've got lions welcoming on both sides. And if you find the entire semicircle, it is filled with animals. That's not exactly a lion. It's a combination of a lion, an elephant, and a horse. So it's called, that unique animal is called Yali in Tamil. So when we discuss the South Indian Dravidian architecture, we are going to see that Yali more. So this Yali was a combination of lion. So there is lion. If you see immediately on either sides of the stage, you've got lions. This was a combination of elephant also, right? So to show it's a combination of elephant, the elephant face is depicted on the left corner. You see 2 elephants. And when you go around this particular cave, you have a horse as well. So this was a combination of all these animals, and this place was used for drama. So probably that Yali never existed, that the combination of all these animals. It was to showcase that dramas could come forth from your creativity, imagination. Since this was made for drama, probably they wanted to get as innovative and creative as possible. So finally, we are going to come across to one of the very beautiful temples, a trendsetter temple of the Pallavas, the climax of Pallavas. So this was called the Vaikuntha Perumal temple, built by Nandivarman II. Between 732 and 796 AD was his regime. After the early death of Parameshwaravarman II, who lived between 705 and 710 AD, he ruled for a very short period of time, 5 years, 6 years, but he was not the direct descendant. See, this Nandivarman II was not the direct descendant of Parameshwaravarman II. He was a descendant in the parallel line of Bhimavarman. So there was a king called Simhavishnu. So Simhavishnu's lineage is what we have seen till Parameshwaravarman. So this Simhavishnu had a brother called Bhimavarma, and Bhimavarma's that line had a descendant called Nandivarman. So Nandivarman came in that lineage, and I'm telling you, I could be wrong, but in my very little knowledge of history and architecture, I can tell you the only temple in this world, when I say temple, any piece of monument of the past, that depicts the entire history from the top till the last descendant of a dynasty is this Vaikuntha Perumal temple. So when you go to the temple, at a first sight, you won't even be amazed. You'll be looking at the stone panels and be wondering what it is. So they are at about two levels. So when you deep dive, you will understand it's a depiction of the entire dynasty. It's the only temple in the world. Look at the pillars. Look at the lion. So it's not a simple pillar. There's a lion, and the pillar is supported because of the lion. So, and this temple, I'm showing you the Vimanam. So look at the Ashtanga Vimanam. So this is the first ever known Ashtanga Vimanam that I know of. Ashtanga Vimanam is where you have a Garbhagriham for the Lord at the ground floor, and there are steps within the Vimanam, and if you go atop, you find the first floor and the second floor. So there'll be 3 Garbhagrihams. So generally this is done in Vishnu temples, where in one Garbhagriham you have Vishnu in a standing posture, the other 2 levels he'll be reclining, and the other one he'll be sitting. So it's called Ashtanga Vimanam. So this was the trendsetter for Ashtanga Vimanams. And again, you remember, I spoke about Ashtabhuja Perumal in Kanchipuram, and I said you have to remember when I'm going to discuss Cambodia. Please remember this Ashtanga Vimanam as well from Kanchipuram. It's very important for our Cambodia discussion. Now, the Vimanam is threefold. It's west facing. Again, the word west facing is very, very important for us when we discuss Angkor Wat. So, Ashtabhuja, west facing, and Ashtanga Vimanam. So, this is all very important. Now, this temple is called Vaikuntha Perumal Temple in Kanchipuram. So, in Kanchipuram, we have discussed 2 temples, Vaikuntha Perumal Temple and Kailashanatha Temple. Kailashanatha Temple is equally important when we are going to discuss Rashtrakuta architecture and later other forms of architecture, especially probably the Vetuvan Kovil of the Pandyan architecture. So, Pallava dynasty, and especially the Pallavas in terms of architecture, were big trendsetters, because before that we did had viharas and stupas, and we of course had the Gupta architecture, which was very beautiful in Diogat, but something very, very exquisite and marvelous, the trendsetters were the Pallavas. So we will get to understand more about other dynasties in the classes to come.